On a calm morning in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré was in his office at the presidential palace, focused on reviewing reports concerning recent advances in local sustainable development. His attention was particularly drawn to a document about the land reform he had launched, an initiative that was already beginning to transform rural communities across the country. While analyzing the data, his assistant, Marie, burst into the room, holding a tablet in her hands. Her face showed a mix of surprise and excitement. "Mr. President," she said, trying to contain her enthusiasm, "you need to see this." Intrigued, Traoré looked up. "What is it, Marie?" he asked. "It's Jasmine Crockett," she replied, handing him the tablet. "She just gave a speech before the United States Congress and mentioned you." Surprised, Traoré frowned. Jasmine Crockett, an American congresswoman known for her progressive stances and her commitment to social justice, rarely spoke about African leaders in her speeches. Taking the tablet, he started the video. Jasmine, standing at the Congress podium, was passionately speaking about leadership and dignity. Waving a few documents, she declared clearly, "Today, I want to talk about a man who is redefining what it means to be a truly transformative leader." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "The president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré, is showing the world that sovereignty is not just a word, it's a practice. He has rejected Western-imposed economic models and is building effective local solutions." The congressional hall fell silent as Traoré continued watching, captivated. Jasmine continued with emotion. "While many promise change, Traoré is delivering real change. He proves that Africa does not need to be saved, it must be respected. That is a lesson for all of us." Slowly, Traoré lowered the tablet, deeply moved. He had not expected such a tribute, especially from a figure so distant from his political reality. "This changes a lot of things," he murmured, still processing the magnitude of the moment. Marie, noticing every nuance of his expression, said, "Sir, it's incredible. The whole world is talking about you." Traoré shook his head thoughtfully. "It's not about me, Marie. It's about what we are building." Jasmine Crockett sees what many in the West refuse to acknowledge. Africa has its own solutions. Standing up, he moved toward the window. In the palace courtyard, children were playing under the trees while staff carried school supplies destined for the villages. After a moment of reflection, he turned to Marie. "This also gives us greater responsibility. We must continue to prove her right." "What should we do now?" Marie asked. "We will prepare an official statement," Traoré replied after a short pause. "I want to express our gratitude without engaging in self-congratulation." While Marie busied herself organizing the next steps, Traoré remained by the window, reflecting on the significance of this unexpected recognition. He understood that this was far more than mere praise, it was an opportunity to amplify Burkina Faso's message to the world. A few moments later, he called his assistant back. "Marie, prepare an official statement. I want to thank Congresswoman Crockett but also reaffirm our vision." "Yes, sir," she replied, jotting down notes. Traoré quickly sketched out his ideas. "Let's thank her for her support, but above all, let's emphasize that our work is not motivated by applause or external approval. It is driven by our commitment to the Burkinabe people." Over the next few hours, he and his team carefully crafted the statement. He wanted something that was both humble and powerful, reflecting the spirit of their mission. The following day, during a press conference at the presidential palace, Traoré appeared dressed in traditional Burkinabe attire. The room was packed with local and international journalists, eager to hear his response to Jasmine Crockett's speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm yet firm, "yesterday I was surprised by a speech given by American Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She was generous enough to recognize our work in Burkina Faso, and for that I extend my deepest gratitude." A respectful silence reigned over the room. "However," he continued, "I want to make it very clear. Our commitment is not driven by the search for external approval. We are building this country out of faith in our people, our land, and our future." His speech was met with enthusiastic applause, especially from the Burkinabe journalists. Some foreign correspondents, however, expressed skepticism, questioning whether Burkina Faso could face global challenges on its own. In response to a European reporter's question about climate change and economic crises, Traoré answered confidently, "We are confronting these challenges through local innovation, regional cooperation, and, most importantly, the strength of our communities. And that strength cannot be ignored." His intervention spread rapidly across social media, with hashtags like #RespectForAfrica and #LeadershipWithDignity gaining momentum, fueling a wider debate on sovereignty and sustainable development. Behind the scenes, his team worked tirelessly. The Minister of Agriculture established partnerships with local universities to train farmers, while Marie coordinated efforts to ensure that rural families had access to basic resources like water and electricity. "We are only at the beginning," Traoré told his team, "but we can already see the first signs of change. A change that is not just economic but social, cultural, and above all, deeply human." During a visit to a rural village, Traoré met Awa, a farmer who had benefited from the agrarian reform. "Mr. President," she said, handing him a basket of corn and beans, "thanks to you, I can feed my family and even sell the surplus at the market." Deeply moved, Traoré responded, "You are living proof that we can build our future ourselves." Inspired by Burkina Faso's example, young Nigerians launched the Value Your People campaign to fund sustainable community projects. In Burkina Faso, Jasmine Crockett had become a symbol of encouragement. Her words had strengthened national unity around a vision of a dignified and sovereign Africa. At a ceremony organized in her honor, Traoré, dressed once again in his traditional attire, addressed the crowd. The resounding applause reflected the collective emotion. Thousands of kilometers away, Jasmine Crockett, closely following the developments, reaffirmed her support during an interview. "What Ibrahim Traoré is doing is a lesson for the entire world. Africa does not need to be saved. It needs to be respected." Traoré continued on his path, undeterred by external criticism. For him, it was not merely about politics, it was about dignity. During a visit to a newly renovated school, a young girl named Adama approached him, holding a notebook in her hands. "I want to become an engineer to help my people," she said. Smiling warmly, Traoré replied, "You are already on the right path, Adama. We are building this country so that dreams like yours can come true." Images of this encounter quickly spread across social media, illustrating how small gestures of dignity could lead to immense change. Thus, despite criticism and doubts, Ibrahim Traoré pressed forward, driven by a firm conviction. Africa could write its own story, a story built on sovereignty, solidarity, and reclaimed dignity. A few weeks later, the momentum initiated by Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso began to bear fruit far beyond the country's borders. Delegations from other African nations arrived to observe the changes firsthand. The rise of agricultural cooperatives, the renovated village schools, and above all, the revival of initiative within rural communities. At an African conference on sustainable development held in Ouagadougou, Traoré addressed an audience of heads of state, ministers, international experts, and journalists. Dressed in a simple traditional bubu, he spoke to the assembly with the same humility that defined his leadership. "What we are doing in Burkina Faso," he declared, "is not a miracle. It is the result of respecting our people, our land, and our history. Every country here today carries within it the seeds of its own rebirth." The audience, silent and attentive, could feel the authenticity of his words. For many, it was the first time they had heard an African leader speak not of aid, but of hard-won autonomy and restored dignity. Meanwhile, in Burkinabe villages, the movement was gaining momentum. Women organized into cooperatives to pool their agricultural production, young entrepreneurs launched small irrigation projects, and schools came alive with new students eager for knowledge. At the presidential palace, Marie tirelessly coordinated the initiatives on the ground. One morning, as she came to report to Traoré, she handed him a folder filled with letters written by schoolchildren from across the country. "Look, Mr. President," she said, smiling. "They are thanking you for giving them the ability to dream." Traoré leafed through the letters, some clumsily written, others decorated with simple drawings of schools, farms, and united families. One in particular caught his attention. A little girl named Amina had written, "Thank you for giving us the chance to love our country the way you love it." Deeply moved, Traoré gently closed the folder. "This," he murmured, "is our true reward. Not speeches, not titles, just this trust." In the following days, more and more international media began to cover Burkina Faso's experience. Some reports pointed out the remaining challenges: persistent poverty, political tensions, and climate risks. Yet many also acknowledged the silent revolution underway, driven not by massive aid, but by an unshakable popular will. In Washington, Jasmine Crockett continued her advocacy for a new approach to international relations. Speaking at a global partnership conference, she addressed a stunned audience. What Ibrahim Traoré is doing is a powerful reminder. When you respect people, when you give them the chance to organize and to dream, they achieve the impossible. Our role is not to dictate, it is to listen, to support, and most of all to respect. Her words were met with a standing ovation. Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré stayed the course, never losing sight of the essential. At the inauguration of a new agricultural training center, he spoke to the gathered youth. What we have started here is a journey. It will not end with me. It will continue with each of you, in every field you cultivate, in every school you nurture, in every child you inspire. Under the clear skies of Burkina Faso, amid traditional songs and applause, Ibrahim Traoré realized that true change was not a destination but a path traveled together. A path that no criticism or obstacle could derail as long as hope and dignity led the way. And thus, carried by his steady faith in his country, he continued, determined to build the future of a free, dignified, and sovereign Burkina Faso. A few months after Jasmine Crockett's remarkable speech, a new wave of reflection swept across Africa. Everywhere, leaders, intellectuals, and entrepreneurs began to ask, what if Africa truly took control of its own destiny? What if, instead of waiting for outside solutions, each country cultivated its own resources, its own talents? In Accra, Dakar, Nairobi, citizen forums were organized to debate economic and cultural sovereignty. Again and again people spoke of the Burkinabe model, that quiet little revolution born from the collective dream of a simple yet determined man. True to himself, Ibrahim Traoré refused any form of personality cult. Instead, he encouraged the creation of a vast network of exchanges between African countries, called the Alliance for Community Autonomy. In his founding speech, delivered before 100 African representatives gathered specially in Ouagadougou, he declared, "The future of Africa will not be built in isolation, nor in dependency. It will be built in our villages, our schools, our farms, and in the hearts of our people, hand in hand." The project was met with great enthusiasm. Very quickly, local cooperations were established. The exchange of agricultural techniques adapted to African climates, renewable energy projects accessible to villages, and the development of regional economic circuits based on local production. Meanwhile, in the Burkinabe villages, hope was taking root. Elders told the younger generations how, for the first time in decades, they were witnessing the birth of a generation proud of belonging to their land and aware of their own capabilities. At the presidential palace, Marie, still leading the coordination efforts, handed Traoré an emotional report. Dozens of young Burkinabe graduates, trained in newly modernized local schools, had decided to stay in the country to contribute to its development instead of seeking opportunities abroad. "Mr. President," she said with a smile, "your seeds are bearing fruit." "They are not my seeds," he replied humbly. "They belong to the people. I am just the gardener." Internationally, however, reactions were more mixed. Some major Western media outlets continued to express skepticism. How could a small, landlocked country without vast natural resources hope to succeed where so many others had failed? At a global summit where Ibrahim Traoré was invited to speak about African resilience, he answered these doubts calmly. "We are not seeking to impress anyone. We are not trying to prove anything to the outside world. What we are building is for our children, for our communities, and that is what will endure." His speech, filled with dignity, made a strong impression. A standing ovation followed, led notably by representatives from Latin America, Southeast Asia, and other previously marginalized regions. In Washington, Jasmine Crockett continued to advocate fiercely for Burkina Faso's cause. During an interview with a skeptical journalist, she replied, "When you see a people rising on their own, your duty is not to judge. Your duty is to respect and, if possible, to learn." Meanwhile, across African social networks, hashtags like #AfricaForAfricans and #BuildOurFuture began to flourish, fueled by a youth hungry for change. Then, an even greater initiative was born. Ibrahim Traoré proposed the creation of a Pan-African Institute for Local Development, based in Ouagadougou. The goal was simple: to train young leaders from across Africa, not according to external models, but rooted in African realities. Applications flooded in from everywhere: Kenya, Senegal, Ghana, Rwanda, Niger. In the classrooms of the new institute, students learned local agronomy, the history of African resistances, community-based economic models, and the management of natural resources adapted to the continent's realities. One morning, while visiting the facilities, Traoré crossed paths with a group of students. Among them, a young Malian woman named Aminata stopped him. "Mr. President," she said emotionally, "thank you. Here, for the first time, we are taught that we are capable of building our nations with our own hands. We no longer want to flee. We want to stay and build." Deeply moved, Traoré placed his hand gently on the young woman's shoulder. "That is exactly why we are here, Aminata. Because your future is also the future of Africa.